Hello everybody, welcome to lecture 11. This is the end of chapter 9 and the beginning of chapter 10. Okay, so let's continue with our discussion of the possibility of life other than on Earth. And we'll start with other places in the solar system. Okay, so a good question would be, could there have been life on Mars? We're pretty sure there's no life now, but we're not completely sure. We've of course taken samples of rocks and soil from Mars and analyzed them with some of our rovers, but nothing really. Nothing has shown up as life. But that doesn't mean there isn't any life on Mars somewhere. Now, the big question is that was there life on Mars, given that Mars did have running water at some point, right? Liquid water on its surface. So that's a big question, and an interesting one. And then the Jovian moons are also very interesting because they certainly have the possibility of life, and we'll talk about that. Okay, so could there be life on Mars? Well, Mars has had liquid water in its distant past, and it still has subsurface ice, possibly subsurface water near some sources of volcanic heat, right? So if you have a nice hot place, maybe there's actually liquid water, and we know that where there's water, there may be life, so that would be a good place to look. Okay, well, in fact, we have been looking. So in 2004, the NASA Spirit and Opportunity rover sent home new mineral evidence that really tells us that there was liquid water in the past on Mars. So it's very possible that there was life. All right, so this is a really interesting thing. Back in 1984, a meteorite was found called ALH 84001, not the best name in the world for the meteorite, in Antarctica. And the composition indicates that it originated on Mars. Now, this may sound very odd. How did it get here? Well, think about this. You have an impact on Mars. You throw up some rocks. They make their way out of the atmosphere. So it must have been a big impact. But as we know, these things do happen. So you throw stuff up out into space, and it makes its way to other planets, i.e. Earth. So we think that about 13,000 years ago, this meteorite fell to Earth in Antarctica, and that about 16 million years ago it was blasted from the surface of Mars. And of course, the rock itself, right, it formed on Mars about 4.5 billion years ago, because that's when the solar system formed, right? Planets formed, that is. And the interesting thing about this thing is that there was a paper published in 1996 in a very, very good journal called Science, proposing that there was some fossil evidence for bacterial life in this meteorite. Okay, and the evidence was basically not really fossils of the bacteria themselves, but fossils of a product of their metabolism. And now that debate has been going on since 1996. That, you know, people are still going back and forth about whether this is really true, what this is really fossil evidence for life. Given that we're very sure this rock came from Mars, if it was fossil evidence for life, this would be amazing. Now, the cool thing about having a controversy like this is that it stirs a lot of people up, right? It makes people very excited about this, whether they're excited about the fact that everybody else is wrong or they're excited about the science itself, right? But what's happened is it sort of spurred this whole field of astrobiology into high gear. So in some weird sense, this controversy really started the field of astrobiology as a very serious science that it is today. So still cool, and the jury's still out about whether this is actually fossil evidence for life. Anyway, very interesting. Okay, again, we're still looking. We're still looking for evidence of life on Mars. All right, now I think a really interesting idea is that you could have these large subsurface oceans of water on some of the Jovian moons. So, for instance, Europa is the best candidate that we know. If there's other moons that we think maybe have some subsurface ocean, but we're pretty sure about Europa. that it has this large subsurface ocean. So there's an ice covering. It's very cold, obviously, but this sort of heating, this tidal heating, the gravity heating. Remember, we talked a little bit about Io and how it's kind of squished and stretched and squished and stretched by the gravity of Jupiter, the enormous gravity of Jupiter. The same kind of thing can keep water warm under the surface of Europa. So it's very interesting because this large body of water under the ice could harbor life. And there's actually quite a bit of talk about making a mission to Europa and drilling down through the ice to try to figure that out. That's a long way off, but it's a really interesting thing. Okay. Now, Ganymede, Callisto also show some evidence of subsurface oceans, but we're not quite as clear on whether that's the case. There's relatively little energy for life, but there may be still enough, right? We certainly see some of that life coming about in energy due to geothermal vents, right, under the ocean here on Earth. So it's totally possible. These are intriguing prospects for 3 potential homes around Jupiter alone. Okay. Now, Titan, I think, is really interesting. Its surface is too cold for liquid water, like we saw before in another video, but it has lakes of liquid ethane and methane on its surface. So it's got this liquid organic compounds on its surface. So that's an interesting question. And we talked about that before. Do we necessarily have to exclude it because it's not liquid water? Or is it possible that life can develop in pools of liquid ethane or methane? So, what do you think? We'll ask you in a second. Let's just we'll sort of summarize here. So, could there be life on Mars? Well, there's lots of evidence for liquid water that was in the past. So that makes it possible. These Jovian moons that have subsurface oceans, could be life there. So we have some places to search. If we could just get in gear, get the money, and go do it. Maybe one of you will help with that. Become a senator or something. Okay, what do you think about the possibility of life on Titan? Pause the video, think about it, and tell me what you think.